The Kendrick Lamar versus Drake beef has shed light on an interesting topic, that being what it means to be black biologically versus what it means to be black culturally. So, what does it mean to be black? What is black culture? And can biracial people like Drake, can they and are they considered black? So let's look at the two main ways people are considered black, biologically versus culturally. So when we're talking about the biology, we are talking about DNA. It can't be changed. It's built in you. And when we're talking about culture, we're talking about lifestyle. We're talking about values. We're talking about language, music, general experience of life. Now in society, the primary factor that classifies one as black is the biology. The size and shape of the nose, eyes, the lips. We're talking about melanin, so we're talking about skin color. These are all physical characteristics that you can observe about a person. Of these physical characteristics, I think the most obvious is the skin color. In most cases, checking off the skin color box alone is enough to classify one as black. But there are cases where there are people who are just as brown or darker than me, who are Cuban, Indian, Dravidian. So skin color alone may not always be enough, but I would say that is the primary factor. So when we're talking about phenotype, a person can be fair-skinned with black features, nose, lips, mouth. In that case, you may need more of the boxes to check off. And I think because of these small differences is where the whole idea of race can be confusing, because it's not off of just one thing alone. Rarely is it, at least. Now, if you have two parents of African ancestry, it's kind of cut and dry at that point. So what is black culture? So let's start with exactly what is culture in general. Culture is a category with many different subgroups. You have American culture versus European culture versus Asian culture. Differences. Now, inside American culture, you have East Coast versus West Coast versus Southern culture. Inside the South, Florida has a different culture than Alabama's culture. Inside each state, county to county and city to city, there are different cultures. Now, when we look inside of the races, there tends to be an objective difference between white culture, Spanish culture, black culture. So when we talk about music of the black culture, we could talk about the obvious ones like gospel, hip-hop, R&B, jazz. We talk about the fashion. We talk about the language, Ebonics, African American vernacular, the way we speak, the way we use words, accent, slang, dance styles, how we communicate when we see each other, handshakes, dap, dreadlocks, waves, braids, fades, afro, our politics, our religion, the food we eat, gumbo, soul food in general, yams, collard greens, macaroni and cheese, even down to how we tend to name ourselves. You don't typically see an Asian with a name like Latavius. You don't typically see a white woman with a name like Latoya. So these are all different things that make up black culture. This doesn't mean a non-black person can't cook a certain dish, create gospel music, wear dreadlocks, dress in hip-hop fashion, or even name themselves Lil Tay Tay. It just means that doing these things doesn't make you black, and in most cases it would be considered cultural appropriation. Most people will regard it as disingenuous or fake. Now, there's a difference between appropriating and appreciating. I can cook shrimp fried rice, bok choy, egg rolls with a fortune cookie on the side. It doesn't make me Asian. It doesn't make me Chinese. Where the appropriation comes in is when there's a disrespect or a lack of understanding for the culture that you are participating in. Now the question comes to, can a biracial person be black? This is where I believe the one-drop rule would apply. The one-drop rule came about in the 20th century, and it was a legal principle that classified one as black based on just having at least one black ancestor. Now, clearly, that was a law put into place to legally discriminate and deny rights of those who were non-white. So whether or not it is or should even be a way of classifying one as black, it is what we have accepted and practiced for at least the last century. Now, the one drop rule was considered unconstitutional in 1967, but we've likely continued to practice and accept this as an accurate way of establishing one as black. I think likely because the relatability between a black person and a biracial person. One, we have the existence of black DNA, and two, we have a shared experience of prejudice. So we're brothers and sisters. So when we come to Drake, Drake has a black father and a white Jewish mother. So biologically, based on how we have practiced it, Drake is black. But where Kendrick is questioning his blackness is the cultural aspect. Drake seems to have grown up more so identifying with his white Jewish background.
First of all, I live in an all-Jewish area, so where is that? Forest Hill. Okay. I went to a predominantly Jewish school growing up. I definitely had a bar mitzvah in an Italian restaurant, mind you. My lord. Yeah.
And the fact that he grew up in Canada would be another cultural difference between him and American blacks. Now, it's clear that at some point Drake was drawn to the hip-hop culture, but is that enough? Let's take, for instance, a person like Logic, the rapper. I believe mother white, father black. But he is more racially ambiguous, meaning, yes, he is biracial, but he could pass as white. And I'm not sure that his cultural upbringing was that of black culture, because of so much of what black people go through is based on their visible physical characteristics. If you can pass as white, one could argue that you may not, likely do not, go through the same experiences of those who cannot hide their blackness. In Drake's case, I think phenotypically he passes, but does that mean that he is culturally black just because he makes hip hop music? I think this is what Kendrick is calling into question. But with Drake being around since '08, over 16 years later, now we call it into question. But so much of hip hop is about being authentic that I do think it is a valid question to pose to anyone who has grown up outside of the culture and then they jump inside of the culture, change the way they talk, change the way they move, change their swag, and just automatically expect to be accepted. For the most part, we're not questioning the blackness of biracial people in general. J. Cole, white mother, black father. Nobody questions his blackness. You got powerful leaders and influencers inside the black community that are always trying to push the black community forward. And we're not questioning their blackness because they have the biological part and they have the cultural part. I think that's the important part. If you are biracial, nobody will question your blackness biologically, but your commitment and your relatability to the black community will probably always be judged based on your cultural participation, your cultural relatability with the black community. If you only put on one way to fit in with the black community and then turn it off and put on another way to fit in with your non-black community, maybe you shouldn't be saying nigga no more. I'm pretty sure biracial, multiracial people have their own trials and tribulations, not feeling like you're black enough here, not feeling like you belong over here, trying to get in where you fit in. So while I recognize that is a strong possibility and not something I can necessarily relate to, I think it's important to recognize that there is a difference between biological blackness and cultural blackness. And while it may not be fair, I think if you don't have the complete blackness in your DNA and you have just parts, multiracial, biracial, I think there will always be questions of your blackness if you do not come with the cultural aspect as well. And it also may be necessary when you're dealing with a group of people that have gone through so much discrimination and oppression that if you are racially ambiguous or you are half of this and half of that, it's important to know where your beliefs and values or your motives lie. Are you friend or foe? So you tell me what you think. Is biological blackness enough? Just a little bit of black in your DNA, is that enough? Does the cultural aspect even matter?